Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me, what is a kindness cheerleader?
Well, it's one of those things. I work for myself, and I thought, well, if you can't give yourself a job title, then when can you? And because I believe in kindness, I believe there is lots of it in the world. I thought, do you know what? Actually, what I am doing is raising the profile of kindness and saying to people, look, it is here. There is lots of examples of kindness, and therefore, kind of kindness cheerleader came out of that. Really, I'm a communications consultant by profession, by training, and I have for a long time I worked with not-for-profit organisations. I talked about my clients as having a vision of a better world, and then I'm pretty sure it was late 2020 when we were all, I think, going, what on earth is going on? I got to thinking one day, well, you say better world, Sarah, but what do you mean? And that's when I realised that kindness is really important to me. And that more than that, I think there is lots of it. We just don't talk about it enough yet. And so then I thought, okay, so I believe there is lots. What can I do about that? What can I bring to the party? And because I'm a communicator, I thought, I tell stories. And so that's really where the work that has now become my Time for Kindness Wellbeing programme came from, because I thought, well, I can see that there's kindness there, so I'm going to share stories so that other people can see it too. And I probably spent about a year just playing about with it, to be perfectly honest with you. My then, I think, what was she, 13, 14-year-old daughter taught me how to use Instagram because I'd never used it before. And I went for Instagram originally because I had heard it had a bit more of a storytelling vibe and a sort of relatively positive, compared to some of the social media. And I did spend about a year just playing with it, really. And I would see kindness in all sorts of different scenarios or settings, and I would put those on Instagram. And then about a year after I'd started, somebody got in touch with me. I don't know him particularly well. I used to see him kind of knocking around local circles and what have you. I hadn't seen him for a while, and I knew he struggled with his mental health. And he got in touch with me and he said, I've seen what you're doing. Please keep doing it, because the kindness of strangers has recently literally saved me. And when you're in a dark place, it's hard to see it for yourself. And that's the point at which I thought, okay, I need to start doing more of this. I need to sort of take it a bit more seriously, if you like. And so what I do has grown from there. But as I say, it is really, I do lots of different things now, but fundamentally it's about saying, despite what the mainstream media in particular would have us believe, yes, there is awful stuff going on. I'm not in any way talking about toxic positivity or pretending bad stuff's not happening. Clearly there is some awful stuff that happens, but what I am saying is that's not the only story, and we need to kind of rebalance that narrative that we have about our world and also about ourselves within it, really. And so that's where it came from, and where it continues to grow, really, because I have a social media manager I work with. We're sharing a story of kindness, at least one every single day. They are there, I'm not making any of it up. It's all coming. So I spot it, my social media manager spots it, people send them in to me. And there is a lot there. And so, having those, whether you're in the position that the chap I mentioned was in, where, you've got serious mental health crisis and what have you, or actually if you're just having a bad day, that we all have those, don't we? Having something you can turn to remind yourself that yes, you're having a bad day and there's nonsense happening. Actually, that's not the only story, and there's this other positive stuff that can make you feel more uplifted. That can be a really powerful kind of tool, technique to use in your life.
I love that answer. The amazing thing is that there is so much negativity, isn't there? If you look at the news, or there's just everywhere.
Yeah.
There's challenging, difficulty, and I love this approach that kindness actually is everywhere, but that no one's really shining enough of a light on it.
Yeah.
So why do you feel? And I love your top. So
Thank you. Yeah, kindness matters.
So why does kindness matter?
Well, I mean, there are all sorts of reasons, really. So for us individually, when you see kindness, then it makes you feel better. What I particularly like during the time that I've been doing this is there is this increasing body of academic research actually into kindness and around why it matters. And there are a lot of studies on the individual level that have shown how kindness benefits us physically as well as mentally. So a researcher called Dr. David Hamilton did some research that showed that kindness increases oxytocin, so the hormone oxytocin, which people, sometimes gets called the love hormone or the happy hormone or whatever, but it's a hormone that makes us feel better. So kindness increases that, so we feel better. But actually what his research showed was that it also, it goes further and makes a difference to physical health. And this is the point where I'm going to have to check my notes because I'm not a scientist, so I must get the name of it right. So if you have oxytocin, that also then causes the release of a chemical called nitric oxide, and that dilates blood vessels. So what that means is kindness lowers blood pressure as well. There was another research that Harvard University did a study that found that witnessing kindness, one of the many things that's brilliant about kindness is that it is positive for the person who is giving kindness, it is positive for the person who is receiving kindness, and it is also, there is a positive impact on people who just see it and are not necessarily directly involved. So this Harvard study, they showed participants a video of Mother Teresa carrying out acts of kindness, and then afterwards they discovered that the people who had seen these videos had significantly increased levels of salivary immunoglobulin A, which is something which is involved in your immune system. And specifically what that does is it's a first line of defense against pathogens in food. So actually seeing kindness can reduce your chance of food poisoning.
That is insane.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it?
That is wild.
Exactly, absolutely. And so there's all sorts of those kinds of researches into different impacts of kindness as an individual. Another one that I really like, there's a researcher, Dr. Catherine Buchanan at the University of Essex, and hers also was about looking at the impact of noticing kindness. So she had two groups of people, one of whom she showed footage of the Manchester terror attacks from a few years back. And another group, they saw that footage, but they also saw footage of people helping at the attacks. So, the medical people and others kind of helping. And again, what she found was that those that had seen the helpers and not just the bad news, they reported fewer negative emotions. They were more positive about the world in general. Again, it doesn't feel that surprising to me that is the case, but if you think, there, like you say, there is some awful stuff going on around the world. And if you just watch the news and that's all you see, then it has that kind of negative effect building up on itself. Whereas actually, if you can kind of temper that a bit with some more positive things, then again, it does make you feel better. And I like to say kind of, when you feel better, when you see kind, you feel better. And when you feel better, you perform better, whatever perform might mean in your particular context.
Well, it could also just be, I love what you're saying there, is it could also just be just showing up to be a better person the next day. So whether that's in your role or it could just be as a husband or as a wife, perform better, can just be better.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it just, one of the things I think that kindness has a kind of a bad reputation for, if you like, is people can often think it's weak, it's fluffy. I when I originally started doing this work, I said one of the reasons I wanted to do it was for people who believe in kindness, and also people who want to believe in kindness but are perhaps a bit unsure, or a bit embarrassed, it's a bit weak, it's a bit fluffy. And I completely disagree. I think kindness is really powerful. And one of the reasons it's powerful is because it connects us. And like you said there, just in any part of your life, whether it's sort of at home, at work, out and about, whatever, it does, if you're feeling better and you're kind of showing up in a more positive way, then you do connect more with other people, and that's what makes it powerful, in my view.
I love it. And in the business context, I know you work with a lot of organisations. from what I've understood, it can also improve performance.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, there's some great academic research around that as well. And so a study at the University of Warwick found that kindness at work increased happiness, and happier people ended up 12% more productive than less happy people.
Wow, that's insane.
I mean, that's hard to argue with, isn't it, Esther?
But it makes sense though, doesn't it? If you're happier at work, and that stems from other people being kind, or you're in an environment where people are being kind, they're supporting each other, it's collaborative, then it makes a lot of sense that, it's going to boost productivity. Of course it does.
You would think, wouldn't you?
Yes, I mean, it seems like common sense, common logic.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another one in Canada where they found that encouraging kind behaviour at work led to a 20% performance improvement compared to the companies where that wasn't happening. I think that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because, and I don't have the detail of the study, but quite, what kind behaviour is being encouraged at work, I can envisage a situation where that could potentially tip over into something else on your to-do list, another thing that you've got to kind of, now I've got to, as well as doing my sales calls and whatever else I'm doing, I've now got to be kind. So, all of this obviously depends on the kind of a full culture, I think, rather than necessarily kind of instruction to do things. They had a Harvard Business Review did a study where they found that leaders who expressed kindness as part of their kind of daily practice with their teams then found having difficult conversations was easier. And that came from the fact that they already had a kind of positive relationship in place with their team members. And I think another thing that can, and perhaps why it's seen as weak and fluffy sometimes, is that kindness can be confused with nice. And, if you're a kind leader, manager, you're going to shy away from having those difficult performance conversations or restructure conversations or, all that stuff that you might have to do in the course of your job. But actually, again, you can have kind is not the same as nice. So you do need to have those conversations, but it's about the way that you have them and the things like giving people time to process information. If you're having a conversation about performance, for example, somebody said to me once, well, what about cruel to be kind? Well, I got no time for that at all. I don't think being cruel is kind at all, but having a difficult conversation to help somebody understand kind of what's expected of them in their job, where perhaps they're not quite hitting the mark, what they're, part of, you can do that in a kind way.
There's kindness in that. Yeah. There's kindness in that, absolutely. Because I think if I take it back to, I'm trying to strip it back to, if I genuinely want to help the individual, I genuinely deeply care about that person. So whether they're part of your team or they're part of whatever, but you genuinely care about that person, the kindest thing to do is to be true, is to be the truth and be authentic. So therefore, I can certainly see in that Harvard review that, kindness and nice, different things, absolutely. But the kindest thing to do is give someone genuine encouragement, genuine feedback, genuine advice and guidance. Yeah. And I can absolutely see why that's going to be far better in business.
Yeah, exactly. It's that, I think it's Brene Brown, isn't it, who says about clarity is kindness, I think.
Yeah.
And some of that comes into it as well in terms of, as you say, kind of having those conversations and helping someone to kind of achieve their potential, achieve what's expected of them. Because if you don't do that, you're effectively setting them up to fail, and that's not kind. And there's also, it is complex. It becomes multi-layered for if you're leading a team, because it's not just about that one person, is it? You've got everybody else, and quite often what happens if someone isn't performing is that those around them end up having to sort of pick up the slack or extra work, and that's not kind to them either. So there's multiple parts to it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just reflecting on the point you made earlier about being cruel to be kind. I can't see a world where that works.
No, neither can I.
Not long term, not if we're talking about business or even in relationships, wherever you put that. But being cruel to be kind, I just can't see where that could fit in ever.
No,
anywhere.
No, absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
no matter what happens is you're going to hurt that other person. And I think what we're talking about, whatever the situation, this is about, well, I think being cruel to be kind is about hurting the other person in some respects because you're being cruel, right? So that's going to create, the person who's receiving that is going to feel violated in some way, no matter what. But if you're leading with kindness and then maybe you are giving difficult feedback, but then if it's delivered in a kind way, which is maybe we just need to look at these few areas, maybe there's some training programs, maybe there's X, Y, and Z, maybe we just need to do this, whatever it is, with deep kindness, then surely any feedback is not going to matter. It's just the way it's delivered.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it's about empathy, isn't it? And
empathy.
And thinking about how is that person going to receive,
how they're going to feel.
Yeah, exactly. And is there a way that I can, deliver that feedback that, as you say, it doesn't hurt them. It may be difficult for them to hear. They may need time to process it. And I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Is that it's allowing someone time and the time that they need to process things. So in my my communications work, which I also still do, effective communication is about audience. Essentially, it's about understanding things from your audience's point of view, and it's about understanding insight into what's important to them and that kind of thing. And I used to describe that part of my work as kind of putting yourself in their shoes, and then I've changed that now because actually it isn't about how would I feel if I were them? It's how do they feel? What is their experience that is very likely to be different to mine? And so, for me, that's much more empathetic to not just think about, well, why are they upset? I wouldn't be upset. Well, that's not really relevant. Whether you would be upset or not, it's how does that person feel? And I guess you have empathy, don't you? And then there's the listening side of it as well. I think that's definitely a skill which is perhaps not rated as much as it should be, although perhaps, I don't know, my sense is maybe that's changing a little bit. I don't know what your experience has been in that regard, but there is definitely something about and I guess that brings us back to connection again, doesn't it, in terms of kind of showing empathy, listening to what someone's really saying, either in their words or body language or whatever it might be. But there's definitely that element there of in those conversation is kind if you're taking all that kind of information in.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that's about deep listening, and it's about peeling back the layers. Well, I think the one thing that I've learned in my business years, it's the thing that is said is never the thing, but it's actually about the thing that is a few layers deeper than that. And actually the way of getting there is listening.
Yes.
And whether that's to a client or it's to one of the people in the team or to leadership, whatever, it's actually about understanding the things that's a few layers deep.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to give you another example. It's actually even in parenting. So I think about my child who says he's unhappy because the toy, and I'm thinking it's not actually about that. It's actually about this other few things that has happened which you haven't thought about. So it's interesting because the way things present themselves are never actually the way they are. But if you are authentic and you care about that person, that human, or that situation, normally the issue is far, far, far deeper. So actually, that's...
Yeah. Oh, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. But, I think you're right. And I think it's about, I think sometimes in businesses, there can be a lot of sort of time pressure put on us. And actually those, as you say, sometimes what's going on is several layers deeper. Well, it's going to take time to get to that, either kind of time in that conversation, but also I think having taken the time to build up a relationship prior. And I think that's where the study where leaders who express kindness finding difficult conversations easier, that's kind of where that's come in, because they have taken the time over the previous however long to build that relationship. And sometimes in business, we can be, as I said, there's a lot going on. There can be that time pressure. We want results now, and sometimes that's not realistic. That's certainly not necessarily going to be a kind approach if we're just going for that side of things.
I think kindness is strength.
Yeah.
From everything that you said so far, it's actually Well, I have a coach. His name's Jason. He came on the podcast ages ago. He was exceptional. And one of the things he talks about is below the line and above the line thinking.
Okay.
Where's your thinking at? And it's interesting because when you think about kindness, you almost naturally you're going to go, like you said at the very beginning, it's a bit weak, it's a bit fluffy, it's a bit that. But maybe the perception is it's weak and fluffy in that. But actually, when I start to think about it and think, well, where is it positioned on that kind of that graph? It's actually kindness. When you're kind to someone, it's showing strength.
Yeah.
It's right at the top. Right, it's right at the top of kind of that level of thinking, below the line and above the line thinking. And that's like, it's positive, but it's showing strength as well.
Yeah.
And almost from the very beginning thing that you said at the very beginning, it's like a circle of positive, not toxic positivity, but a level of positivity in the fact of we're being kind to each other. And if that's observed, then that's seen as a positive thing as well. And there's all those different benefits that go with it.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I think, kindness isn't always easy. It's not, and again, to speak to your, point of it being strength, it's not always the easy choice. And, sometimes people choose to be kind, in the face of unkindness, for example. But if you choose, it's like, isn't it? We can only influence the way that we are and the actions that we take, and that might then have a knock-on impact into the way that somebody reacts. But sometimes, we have to take that first step to be kind. And some of that, I guess, comes back to what you were saying of thinking, parenting-wise. It's not always easy to, you've got a child that's having some kind of meltdown. It's not always easy to think, okay, what's really going on here? Let's just sit with them for a minute, let them calm down, and then we can explore it further. But, if you do that, you get better results in the long term, over and above kind of sending them to their room or whatever it might be.
I mean, in that context, what I've learned, and it's a really funny thing because I feel like my wife is my guidance on parenting. So she gives me a lot of advice and guidance. And the other day, Logan was really angry about something. And I thought, not a thought, but I could have naturally received that as I'm now going to be angry at you because you're angry. Yeah. Whereas what I've learned here is just to neutralize the situation. He's angry for a reason, but it's not the reason that's presented.
Yeah.
He's angry because something hasn't quite gone his way. And actually the answer to that is give him a cuddle.
Yeah.
And just calm him down and see how he is. And actually it's interesting because although that's with a 4-year-old, I'd also do exactly the same in a business situation now.
Wow.
When someone is elevated or you can clearly see they're angry, you're like, what is this? What's actually happening here? Because the thing you're angry about isn't that important. So actually what's deeper? And actually, I just find that whatever human person you're talking to, whether you're talking to a 4-year-old or you're talking to someone else in leadership, it's almost the same thing every time. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is absolutely. It's about being human, isn't it? And interacting with someone else as a human, and that thing of not having to be right all the time. I think sometimes that's where those people can get into those kind of negative spirals almost of kind of arguments and one-upmanship and what have you, is because actually the most important thing is to be right. But actually if we take that away and think actually the most important thing is to connect and to have this relationship and ultimately achieve something bigger together, then that puts the whole thing in a very different context.
Yeah, it really does. I love that. So I'm thinking a lot about, during our conversation here, I'm thinking about kindness, but I'm also thinking about culture.
Yeah.
So how do they entwine? So when you're working with businesses, how do they link together?
Yeah, I mean, I think a business culture, what I'm seeing more and more businesses talk about their values. I mean, I think often for a long, quite some time, businesses have talked about, what are our values and so on. And again, both in my communications work and in this work that I'm doing, I get involved in that kind of thing where culture, values are not about just having some words on the wall. It is about how do we interact? How do we treat each other? How do we do things? And so it's been interesting. I'm seeing more and more businesses talking about, one of kindness is one of their values. And then starting to think about, well, what does that look like in practice? What does that mean? And the work that I do often is around well-being, because of the things we've talked about in terms of the impact on the individual, and then that knock-on effect to their performance in business terms. And so there is something about thinking about, okay, because what I'm doing is I'm not teaching anyone to be kind. My work is all about teaching people to see kind and to notice what is already there. What's really interesting, when I've run some of my workshops with teams, one of the things we do at the end of the workshop is, we've talked about what is kindness, why does it matter, what does it look like, that sort of thing. And I get them at the end to think about, okay, so how are we, we've recognised now that kindness is great and it makes us feel good, how are we going to keep that going? And it's been really interesting, some of the conversations that we've had in that context, where for a start off, I've had colleagues, I ask them to share stories, examples of kindness. And, I don't say it has to be a work one. It can be for sort of different contexts, but quite often, given the setting we're working in, they will come up with things from work. And you will see, people will say, oh, well, the other day, Susan did X, Y, Z for me. And Susan will say, oh, that you noticed that, that's lovely that you're naming it as kindness. Actually, that thing of but I was just doing my job. I wanted to help you, and so I think there is something in terms of kind of building a culture of kindness about using the language of kindness and calling it what it is, not kind of skirting around the edge and trying to call it something else. Again, if we accept that kindness is strong, then the language of it is strong too. So let's use it. They also, it's incredibly simple, some of the actions they decide to take, or deceptively simple, I suppose, some of the actions they decide to take. So for example, what quite often comes up as a suggestion is, having experienced talking about a story of kindness and how it made them feel, well, from now on, we'll start all our team meetings by sharing a story of kindness. We will still have to talk about the operational challenges we're facing. We'll still have to talk about our targets. We'll still have to talk about all that stuff. But if we start by sharing a story of kindness, one of us has noticed recently, it puts everyone in a more positive frame of mind to then have that difficult conversation. And on the face of it, you think, well, that's really simple, but it can you can see how it can have a pretty profound effect. And again, that sort of leads into then the culture of how they interact with each other, how they behave with each other. And it's interesting, as I say, that that whole conversation around just doing my job. I run quite a broad church on this, to be honest with you. And I feel it's not an either or. I think you can be just doing your job and it can be kindness. I don't think, it has to be one or the other. And my take on it is, if seeing something as kind makes us feel better, why don't we just call it kindness to have that impact? Why don't we just have that effect? Whereas some people are much more... they want the sort of rigid definitions, I suppose, and so on. And that's fine. All our brains work in different ways, don't they? But I think, the more we can get used to seeing kindness in our culture, talking about it, using that language, and a lot of that, it comes from the leader, doesn't it, in terms of that role modelling, even if it's, they're role modelling, pointing out kindness when they see it and naming it as such, then that starts to help everyone else in the team feel comfortable doing the same thing.
Are you seeing then, from what you said there, it feels like there's some resistance to the word kindness, or resistance to bringing it into business, or trying to box it off in a different way? Like what are you feeling there?
I think it comes back to what we talked about, it perhaps being kind of weak and fluffy, and therefore maybe not a kind of a proper business thing. I think it's and in some cases, actually, it's not necessarily even resistance. it's sometimes it's just they haven't thought about it. You know, it's not something that is naturally talked about necessarily. As I say, I think more businesses are now using the word kindness, but whether it goes beyond that, I mean, it will vary, won't it? But I think in some cases it is just that nobody's really ever thought about kindness and its power and the difference it could make to their business.
It's interesting. So you're also seeing that companies are putting this as part of their values as well.
Starting to, yeah, as a word.
Yeah, because I've seen. So I think about Oracle's values, and probably some of the three that are relevant here. They all kind of no, they don't. Let's think about it. So one's integrity, teamwork, and collaboration. So, but kindness kind of entwines with all of those in some respects, because integrity is about being truthful, being honest, and doing the thing. And then teamwork and collaboration. Well, if you entwined kindness into all of those, just being kind to your team players, so doing your job but doing it in a kind, respectful, professional manner, I just feel like there's only benefits everywhere for all of it.
Yeah.
And probably we need to take this word out of it being light and fluffy and think about this as being a real level of strength and definition. Yes. And I think that it's probably that shift that needs to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's Graham Allcott has written a book that came out just last autumn, Kind, the Quiet Power of Kindness at Work. And that's some of the things that he has in that, he talks about in that book is kind of what does it look like? You know, we accept, first of all, obviously puts the case for the power of kindness and that it is powerful. And then what does that look like in reality and in the way we interact? And like you say, you know, it is entwined already in a fair amount of the things that are happening. But it certainly to me feels as if kindness kind of, so, you know, you're the ones that you talked about there, you know, kindness takes that a little bit deeper, so takes it beyond just being, again, kind of just words that we have on our wall or our screensavers or whatever, and it being about the way we do things around here and the way that we interact with each other, because so much kindness is, you know, yes, there is being kind to yourself is a big thing as well, but a lot of kindness is between individuals and between, you know, more than one person. And so how do we bring that in and make it really clear and intentional as well? I again, in my workshops, first thing we do is we talk about, well, what's the definition of kindness? And I've got various different definitions that I use depending on the context, because actually there isn't a single definition of it, but the definitions tend to have, I think it's three similar elements, really. One is about action. So kindness is active, something happens. One is positivity. So there's some kind of positive outcome as a result of kindness. But the third one is intention and intent. So there is in kindness, there is some kind of intent to do something positive for someone else or yourself. So, you know, it doesn't happen by accident. I mean, sometimes it does, but, you know, you can kind of learn and train yourself to take those intentional actions in a kind way. If you're, it's a bit like, obviously, as I say, I'm teaching people to see what's there. And so I teach them habits to start to notice things more often, and to start with having that kind of those habits written down and having that intention of, right, I'm going to actively look around me for some kindness. That's kind of how you start. But obviously over time, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and it ends up second nature. And I think to your point of culture, that's where it's, you know, culture is really happening, isn't it? Is in those things that we're not even thinking about, that we just do because that's how we operate around here.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating talking to you. Just going back to the performance piece, is that if we all learnt to be kind and see kindness that's happening across the business, I'm thinking there's a link here with a stressed environment. People are stressed and they're frustrated and those sorts of things. And the opposite to that, is probably people working in flow state.
Yeah.
So they're committed, they're focused, they're really getting into their role. And I'm just thinking, to increase performance, you want more people to be into flow state. So, and that means they're productive, they're efficient, they're enjoying their work, they're happy. And it's interesting because it's like, if you can remove the stress or the unnecessary stress in business, there's always going to be stress, right? There's a target, there's this, there's that. But actually on a day-to-day basis, those things don't matter, because you can have a target which is 12 months away. It doesn't really make a difference to right now. So right now, all it matters is about this day of work. And then it's, lots of days of work collaborating and put together. So it's almost like, if we can interject kindness as a culture, we can reduce the working environment, so therefore unnecessary stress is removed, with some tension, because people want to be high performers, football teams want to win the league, all that sort of stuff. So that's got to be there, but that can be quite an intrinsic motivation. And on a daily basis, actually what you're seeing is acts of kindness, people there to support and collaborate, people working in flow states, they're really into what they're doing. I can only see that as being one of the fundamentally best environments to be part of. And therefore, it will deliver long-term retention of staff, long-term growth. I'm trying to see the negative here.
Absolutely. You and me both. Absolutely. I think one of the things that what you've just said there is kind of reminding me as well, is that a lot of this, it's about trust and psychological safety, actually. And I think, some of when we talked about leaders and getting on better with difficult conversations where there's an environment of kindness, I think a lot of that is because they have taken time to build, to show kindness, to encourage kindness, and they have built psychological safety and kind of trust with their people as well. And again, it's, I struggle to see any negative side to building trust in your business, in your organisation.
Yeah, gosh. What you got a lot of research there. Let's dive into some of that research. I'm sure you got some interesting things.
Yeah. So there was a little bit, not so much about retention, but recruitment, actually. So recruitment is quite challenging, as I understand it, for a lot of businesses at the moment. And there was a study that the Born This Way Foundation, and yes, that was set up by Lady Gaga and her mum. It's brilliant. They do some great stuff, and it's around youth mental health, actually, a lot of it, or younger people's mental health. But they did a study with workers aged 18 to 29 and found that 77% of them were more likely to apply for a job if it listed kindness as an important value for the company. So again, it's not just about for your current employees, but kind of for your future employees, and kind of bringing new people in. It's really strong, and 74% of that same group also said that having a kind community in the workplace was really important to them, and that again is what they were looking for. There was a study. The Price of Incivility study.
Never heard of that.
No, that's a Harvard Business Review one again.
Okay.
So the Price of Incivility study. And they looked at the impact of unkind behaviour in a workplace. So things like verbal abuse, passing the blame, feeling psychologically less safe, those kinds of things. And in those kinds of environments, 48% of people intentionally decreased their work effort. 47% of people intentionally decreased the time they spent at work, and 78% said that their commitment to the organisation declined.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
So it's hard to see why you would want to encourage that kind of environment, and I guess people are not necessarily encouraging that kind of environment as such, but perhaps encouraging the behaviours, the competitive behaviours, the kind of pitching people against each other, those kinds of things, is going to lead to that sort of environment.
It's so interesting. So I used to work in a culture I won't name the company, but they used to pit us against each other. It was quite deliberate. I talked to my sales team a lot about this.
Right.
It was quite a deliberate thing. There'd be, and that's a very normal thing in a sales environment, that you compete with your other sales colleagues. And it's really interesting because they had a very high turnover of staff in sales, very well-known business. And I often thought, this doesn't feel like it's the best way, because I'm competing with someone else who's my colleague to try and get my top name up there. But there's not a limited amount of revenue that we can achieve. There's an unlimited amount of revenue that we can achieve. So we can all become the top salesperson, or we can all deliver against our number. So I kind of thought, why should there be a leaderboard and also a culture where we are going to come in and fight over deals and fight over positioning and those sorts of things? And it never made a lot of sense to me, but it almost seemed like that's how things were done years ago. Big leaderboard, you've got to make sure you're at the top. That's it. We're in a competitive environment. And I often think, in the end, everyone that I worked with has left that business over the number of years. And there's a lot of people that worked in that company, but it's good to be competitive, like have a healthy competition with colleagues, etc. But now I've kind of looked at that and the psychology of it, and most people have left. I think, well, the opposite to that is collaboration, working together. Even if you're an individual contributor, which we are in sales, you have an individual number, you don't have a team number, but you can still work in a collaboration together, because the people that are in that same job, instead of competing with them, they can actually be the ones that can help you. It might be internal systems. It might be the conversation with the customer. It might be, what product is this? There's a whole raft of things for all of those people being in the same situation to actually collaborate and help each other. They can all make their number. They can all work well together. So I'm quite passionate around that, because I saw how destructive that was as a culture, the bloodbath it was, essentially. Yeah. Versus a culture where everyone helps each other, even if they have got individual numbers, or if they just whatever type of team. And I just often think, in our world, there's like an approach called the 3 R's. It's retention. Sorry, no, it's not. Let me start again. It's recruitment, retention, revenue. Right. Revenue is deliberately at the end, because you need to recruit the right type of person. You need to retain them, then they deliver the revenue. Yeah. So the first 2 pieces which you're talking about there, you're not going to attract the right people if you don't have the right branding and conversations at the very, very beginning, which aligns to your conversation.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a couple of things that kind of pop into my mind then. One is, I'm a fan of the Great Pottery Throwdown program on TV on Channel 4, and I am always struck. So that's a competition where I think they start with 10, I think it is, potters, and each week they have to make something, and each week somebody is then potter of the week, so they're sort of, their thing gets put in a special gallery and someone leaves, and then obviously ultimately it's down to somebody will win. But I'm always struck with how they help each other as well. So they tend to have potters of various different levels of experience, and so some of them have been doing it for longer, and some of them, are younger or just haven't been doing it for as long, and they're not quite sure, their wheel's gone a bit off on the wonk a bit, and, someone will say, make sure you do whatever to kind of get it back on track and that sort of stuff. And it always strikes me that, there is a competition and they are going to win, but they do also help each other out. And I think that's, a much kinder environment than some of the, on competitions where, as you say, it's all about just being the one and kind of dog eat dog world of getting to the top. And the other thing that strikes me is that Graham Allcott, in his book, he talks a lot about, the type of thing you're talking about there comes from a scarcity mindset. And actually, you fight each other because there's only a limited amount of stuff. But like you said, actually there's potentially unlimited sales that could be made. And having that abundance mindset means you are much more likely then to be kind and work together and collaborate and so on. And actually then that's better for everybody.
I'd never thought about that before. I'd never thought about that there. That's so interesting. So interesting. I never thought about that as a scarcity mindset versus it being an abundant mindset.
Yeah. I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's really interesting. I love that. Yeah, so I'm thinking about my old employer, and that's absolutely how it was. There's finite amount of deals, there's finite amount of revenue. We're all competing. We're actually, I suppose, the mindset of where we are now is just there's infinite amount of people that we can talk to, infinite amount of revenue. There's just a world of opportunity. It's completely different.
Yeah. And then that's better for you as individuals. It's better for the company as well. Actually, I think that's the other thing with a lot of this. It's kind of the right thing to do for individuals and their well-being. But equally, as all this research shows and the conversation we've had, it's better for the company as well. The company does better. The company will make more sales. The company will have higher profits. So, it doesn't have to be either or. It's a win-win for everybody.
Are there I'm thinking about business, say 10 or 20 years ago, feels really different to this conversation. What do you think the shift has been, and are some companies more open to this than others?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wonder whether some of the shift comes from some of the things like, the studies from the Born This Way Foundation, where the kind of younger people, new people coming into the jobs market, whatever, are looking for something different. It's not an area I have a great deal of expertise in, but I wonder if that has been changing over time. The aspect of that concerns me a bit is, particularly in terms of leadership, is how if somebody is new into a leadership role, if we're not talking about kind leaders or leaders that are acting with kindness enough, how do those new leaders know how to be a leader? That kind of, we've got to keep everybody under pressure and get them all competing against each other type of leadership. If somebody new as a leader looks around and says, well, how do I do this? Oh, that's how you do it, because that person's doing it that way, so that must be the way. It worries me that it can become a bit, sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, really. You might not, as a new leader, you might not want to do it like that, actually. That might not be your natural way of leading. But if what you're seeing is people that appear to be successful doing that, then are you going to sort of change that way? But I suppose we are talking more about kind leaders. We do hear about them, not enough, and not about, there are a lot more of them out there. So I think in terms of why it's changing, I guess it's about expectation. I mean, there are movements like the B Corp movement, for example, the businesses who are a certification process that they go through to say that they are going to equally, and they do equally value people, profit and planet. So I think maybe, again, like you said, over the last 20 years, perhaps the fact that the climate change and environmental crisis and everything, again, that's become more high profile. I think that's perhaps leading people to think about these things more and think about, well, actually, the way we have always done things, it's not really working anymore. And it's certainly not going to keep working long term for us and our grandchildren. So I wonder if there's something there in terms of people's mindsets changing, because that kind of B Corp movement, and there are others, the kind of responsible business, purpose-led business movements, those kinds of things, they are thinking about different things. So they're not just thinking about what's the number at the top of that board. They are looking more broadly. So perhaps some of that is changing the culture of how businesses operate.
It's interesting. So just for anyone who doesn't know, can you just define what is a B Corp?
Yeah, so it's a movement that started in the States, I think, and is spread around the world. And actually, the UK has got one of the highest numbers now of B Corps. And essentially, it is a certification process that businesses can go through that is about proving that they are not just focusing on their profit. They are also treating people well. So that's their own people and the communities that they operate in as well, supply chains, all of those sorts of things, and the environment as well. So looking at their impact on the environment, and it is, as I say, it's a certification process. I think they have to redo it every 3 years, maybe. But again, it's if you go through that process, you have the quality mark essentially, and you are then part of a community as well. So they also, there's a lot of collaboration within that, and they are the B Lab is the company name that runs the B Corp process. They also have a campaign going on called the Better Business Act. So in the UK, they are pushing for change in the Business Act, so that at the moment the only thing that companies are legally required to take seriously, as it were, focus on is profit. They want to change the actual act, the legislation, so that they are required to focus on the profit and people and planet. So that's an ongoing campaign at the moment.
So is that going to be for every business?
I think that's the idea, yeah. That if it changed, it's because it's the legislation that governs businesses. So if they get the legislation changed, then it would apply to everybody.
Wow, that would be a huge change for businesses if they have to report on not just profit, but how they impact people, the environment. That would be a huge change, wouldn't it?
I mean, some of them, I think bigger ones have to report on some of that already, don't they? Particularly on the sustainable side of things. But potentially it would be a huge change. And I have just joined the coalition, the Better Business Act Coalition. And one of the reasons I've done that is because, again, I believe in doing things differently, and that like I said, the way we've always done things isn't working anymore. It's actually causing a lot of damage. And so, there are. What I like about it is it's not saying, well, you can't make a profit. Absolutely, you can make a profit, and you can still be a successful business in that sense. But actually, it's not just about that. It's about the other things as well. So again, I guess I'm all about the balance.
There has to be balance. I mean, businesses have to make profit, because if they don't make a profit, then they won't be able to use that profit to either fund back into the business or fund research and development. So businesses have to be there for profit. That they have to be, right? Or else the business isn't going to be in business any longer, and therefore those people lose their jobs. So number one, it would make sense that it still has to be for profit. And profit's not an ugly word. Yeah. Profit means the business is going in the right direction. Yeah. It's a good measure. So I think that has to be there, because then it allows them to invest into people. It allows them to invest into skills and development and everything else. So it's a critical component.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think, that's what I like about it, is that it is all three equally. It's not kind of one over another, and it's. Like you say, it's profit can sometimes be, in certain circles seen as a dirty word or whatever, but actually it doesn't have to be, but it's about how you go after those profits, isn't it? And how you operate in generating that income and profit as well. So it'll be interesting to see. As I say, it's an ongoing campaign. That particular aspect is an ongoing campaign, but the B Corp movement, the UK has more B Corps in it than other parts of the world. So hopefully that says something positive about us and our environment.
Certainly does. Yeah, it certainly does. And so you would then link into those organisations because of the people aspect, and then how do you support them? Is it you training, coaching, noticing?
So the workshops that I run are well-being workshops primarily. So it's about businesses that recognise a lot of the stuff we've talked about today, and how important their employees' well-being is for the individuals, but also for the business. And then the workshops that I run teach people the habits to notice kindness in the world around them, so that they have that as a tool for their own well-being. We all have bad days, don't we? So having something that we know we can turn to make us feel a bit better on those bad days is kind of a tool in our mental health box. So the businesses that I work with recognise that they want to support their people in that way, and they just often want something different to sort of add into their wellbeing program for their people. And what I find is, I think I said earlier, I teach people these habits to notice kindness, because it comes relatively easy to me. Not every day, we all have bad days, like I said. But for some people, they're just not quite sure where to start. And so having some habits you can intentionally use to kind of get yourself on that track are useful. And then the other thing I also do is I do talks around that as well. So I will be like the opening keynote at a conference or something, again often to kind of get people in a positive, upbeat frame of mind for the kind of start of the conference and so on, because I see it time and time again. And the feedback I get over the Time for Kindness work that I do, the social media that we have and the website, time and time again, what people say is, I love what you're doing. It makes me feel positive and hopeful in a world that doesn't always give us that at the moment. So, that's kind of what I'm, again, to your first question about being a cheerleader, that's what I'm cheerleading. That's what I'm spreading or want to spread is to, get people to believe that it is out there. Kindness is out there in all sorts of contexts. It's a question of training ourselves to notice it and consciously look out for it. And then you feel better.
I mean, there's just benefits and positives everywhere. There's no, again, this entire conversation, I've not been able to find a single negative anywhere other than a perception, which might be someone might see it as being weak. But I think what we've hopefully been able to redefine here is being kind is a strength.
Yes. Yeah. I hope so. Because it is a superpower. Let's own it. And like I say, if being kind feels for whatever reason, a step too far for you at the moment, that's fine. Because actually, if you start to notice it first, then that's an easier, arguably a sort of more internal way of getting some of that positivity first. And what I mean, it's not something I measure, so I don't know, but what I suspect is that once people start to notice kindness, once they're kind of consuming the content that I put out there or they're noticing it in their own world, I think being kind is then a knock-on effect from that, because actually what will happen is people get ideas and think, oh yeah, I could do that. That's because a lot of the kindness stories I share are really small, everyday things, but that have a big impact. So I think people might think, oh, actually, I could do that. That's not too scary. I could hold the door open for somebody. I could let somebody in the supermarket go in front of me because they've only got a packet of biscuits and a pint of milk and I'm doing the weekly shop. So they can start to do that. But also, I think what also happens, what I do know happens, is people say, oh, I do that. I've just never thought of it as kindness before. And I'm going to reframe it in my mind now and think of it as kindness. And then that leads obviously into the positive things we've talked about. So, that noticing kindness is a sort of a first step, I hope, for people.
It's really interesting you just said that, because it just made me think about one of the funny things, or one of the things that I often do is if you're in that queue and you've got a big thing and someone behind you has I often go, oh, you go first. Yeah. And the level of, because that's the person receiving that, they're so unexpected of, oh wow, a complete stranger has just said you go first in the queue. It's such a minor thing, and it maybe it saves a tiny bit of time for that person, but I think it's the thought. And I sort of now, if I have the opportunity to do it, it makes me feel amazing.
Yes.
And it's like such a simple little tiny thing to do.
Yeah.
But then it really changes. You can see it like a tiny little bit of positivity. It changes their day. Oh, someone was kind to me today. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that happens a lot. I get it sent in a lot as a story in supermarkets. I get a lot of stories coming in, sent in from supermarkets, a lot sent in from public transport. Somebody giving up a seat or helping someone find the right stop, or we have even had stories of people's fare being paid for them because they didn't have enough change, that sort of thing. We do get quite a lot of stories come in from places where people gather. I don't get as many from workplaces at the moment, and I don't think it's because they're not happening. I think it's because people have just not thought about it and have just not kind of registered it as a kindness, maybe, or haven't thought to tell me about it. But kindness is happening all over the place.
Well, I think it's probably easier to do it in real life because a lot of work now is remote. Because of that remoteness, now you can still be kind, of course, but because you're not physically interacting, it's harder to do the nice thing because we're not there in the office. So I can understand maybe if it's not coming from the workplace so much. What other examples do you have of like just little things that maybe we can even bring into our day that we can go out and we can start just using?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of actual kindness stories.
Just little kind of stories or acts.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things is to consciously think about how your what a situation is meaning to you. So, for example, one of my favourite stories that we've had sent into us quite a long time ago now, actually, was somebody who went to a shopping centre, and the most of the like double doors, flapping my hands around, most of the doors there was only one set that were working, and there was an older lady who was trying to come out of the shopping centre. She had a little walker thing, and she couldn't. People were streaming in, and she couldn't get out, and she had to keep kind of stopping and so on. But the person who sent us the story, they had clocked that this was happening, and they stopped and let her come through, so that she could come out of the shopping centre. Now, it would be really easy to hear that, see that, and think, oh, well, of course, typical. No one stops these days. They don't bother about other people. But someone did. One person did stop. So let's focus on that and see that kindness and take that kindness on, rather than the negative of all the people that stream through. And so I think that's it's one of the kind of first tips I give people, is just to be aware of your own thought processes. And if you find yourself going down the sort of more negative route, think, actually, can I look at this in a different way? Because like we said, focusing on the positive has a positive impact. So let's consciously do that and kind of change, because and also then where we focus is what we get more of as well. So once you start to notice it, like I said, you see it a lot more. So that's something that's fairly easy, fairly kind of low level for people to do. If you're rushing and you're busy, then it can easily also get sort of knocked out of the way, which is why I say if you have it as a habit of you're consciously going to do it, then it helps you to kind of get into doing it more regularly. So that's one of the things. The other thing I often recommend to people is, and it's not something we've really touched on today, but being kind to yourself, because that's really important as well. And if you're experiencing kindness yourself, then it makes it easier to spot it elsewhere. So, make sure that you are being kind to yourself. And that can look very different to different, it might be a bubble bath, a good book. That is kindness to some people. But in other situations, it might be getting that negative voice in your head to be quiet and find a way to ignore that voice. It might be spending more time with your loved ones. It might be spending less time with people who don't make you feel good about yourself. There's a whole range of stuff. But if you're experiencing kindness yourself, then obviously that's positive for you, but also it then makes it easier to see elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I love that. Just thinking about being more kind to yourself as kind of being almost one of the first things we need to start thinking about.
Yeah, because particularly that sort of negative voices thing. I mean, how often do we beat ourselves up about something afterwards, that we didn't say the perfect thing or we didn't do the perfect thing? And actually, we're all just doing our best, really, aren't we? Most of us just doing our best, just getting through. And things are tough at the moment. There's a lot that people are dealing with. So showing ourselves some kindness is a good thing. And then it makes it easier for us then to kind of have that with other people as well.
Yeah, the negative thoughts, I've thought a lot about this during my years. And the only way that I've personally been able to find a way of calming my mind down, so therefore we're not constantly thinking a negative thing or thinking whatever, is just through meditation or walking.
Okay.
So it's the only two ways. Journaling sometimes as well, that works, but just getting all the thoughts out.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a level of kindness that I give to myself. The meditation, 10 minutes or so, just to kind of calm everything down. And that's kind of like a gift I give to myself each day as a level of kindness, because then, the benefits of that, I feel great most of the day.
Yeah.
And the days that I don't meditate or actually go to the gym, train, etc. But the days that I don't meditate, I always find that there have been a lot more negative thoughts coming in to try and get me. And then the outcome of that is that I might not be as above the line as maybe I'd like to be, or think through situations through it. And that's why I think we link it back to kindness is strength. Is because that's when you're above the line and you're thinking about other people, how their well-being, how they're being, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it is about finding what works for you, isn't it? For sure. I mean, I walk every morning, or try to every morning, and the same. I notice if I haven't done it, it makes a difference during the day. I'm also an amateur artist, a very amateur artist. So it's not getting my paints and brushes out and all the rest of it is also something. But it's a bit like you were saying earlier, weren't you, about that kind of state of flow. It's kind of finding something where you're not kind of stuck in your own head, but you're just kind of in flow. It's very positive for you.
Yeah, oddly, you just said that. One of the areas where I found flow recently, which I was definitely not expecting, again, thinking about my son, he does lots of drawing, arts and craft, etc. Just sitting with him, colouring something in, I find flow. And I remember sat in there the other day, and we just coloured this whole thing in, and he was having a great day and just smashing it all over there, and I was trying to colour it in carefully, and he was like, "Wow, Daddy, that's amazing. How did you do that?" And I'm like,
"Oh, bless him."
It's an amazing thing to say to me, but also I just noticed that 10-15 minutes has gone past, and it was like harmony.
Yeah, absolutely.
So arts and crafts seems to be a wonderful way.
Yes,
of calming the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. When my daughter, she's 17 now, but when she was younger, we used to do a lot of arts and crafts together, and I found I was much better at that than play. I wasn't very good at playing. With toys, and she had this incredible imagination where there'd be a complicated story and all the characters and all the rest of it with the little figures, and I couldn't keep up with it, to be honest with you. So it was too much in my brain. Whereas the art was definitely more my kind of natural environment.
Well, I've really loved our conversation today, so thank you so much for your time. Is there anything around kindness that we haven't covered today that maybe we should think about?
I think we've talked about most areas, haven't we, really? I think, and a lot of it does come back to that, seeing kindness as a strength, noticing that there is lots of kindness around us when we choose to look for it. And, I think that those are the kind of key things to, if you want to kind of start exploring this a bit more, it's a good starting point to be kind to yourself and just in little ways, see what's already going on and then build from there.
Yeah. And what we've established is kindness is strength. Kindness is not being nice. Kindness is definitely strength. And that's what above the line would be for that. And I would be one of the huge advocates for bringing kindness into business, and it being, whether it's part of the values or just being part of the culture, it should be something that we're practicing. Because I just absolutely believe fundamentally it will improve performance. So even if you are a business for profit, which most companies are, you need to be, it will boost performance. Yeah. It will boost productivity. It will boost retention. And therefore, on the 3 R's, therefore the revenue will come as part of that, because everyone's working together. Yeah, absolutely. And times are hard for businesses at the moment, as we know. So actually things that they can do to perhaps set themselves, apart from others that aren't doing that, it's going to give them an advantage. Kindness is going to give them that commercial advantage. Absolutely. Kindness as an advantage, as a business advantage. Then we've created a new thing today. Yeah. If someone would like to get in contact with you or learn more about you, where can they reach out, or what's the way of so I am on LinkedIn, Sarah Browning, and my program is called Time for Kindness. So we have a website, timeforkindness.co.uk, and you can sign up on there to the mailing list, and you can find out that we have a blog on there, kindness blogs, we have kindness stories, and through there you can find us on social media as well. Amazing. Well, lovely talking to you. Thanks for coming in. Oh, thank you for having me.